Chapter 1. The Defiant Encounter. The wind howled through the desolate canyons, scattering dust and debris in its wake. The landscape stretched for miles, nothing but jagged cliffs and shattered remnants of ancient structures long forgotten. The red sun hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the barren world. Its light reflected off the dull metallic surfaces of the wreckage scattered across the ground, remnants of a once proud civilization. Now, the only thing that remained was the ghost of a world abandoned by its creators, forgotten by the universe that had moved on, leaving it to rot. A solitary figure stood at the mouth of the canyon, his boots crunching on the broken stone beneath him. Captain Marcus Thorne, an Earth soldier, had been sent here on a mission by his government. A mission to find the remnants of an ancient alien technology that could turn the tide of war against an impending galactic invasion. But what he had found instead was a being far beyond anything he had ever expected to face. The Xylothian warrior before him was a legend. Stories about her had been whispered across the galaxy. She was known as Queen Serithra, the greatest warrior of her kind. Her name struck fear into the hearts of entire civilizations. No one had ever stood against her and lived to tell the tale. She was an elite commander, a queen of battle, and her empire was one that rivaled any other in the galaxy. She had conquered worlds, crushed armies, and left countless civilizations in her wake. The Xylothian Empire, ruled by her, was one of the oldest and most advanced empires in the galaxy, and it had set its eyes on Earth. As she stood in front of him, her violet skin shimmering with an ethereal glow, Captain Thorne could not help but feel the weight of the situation. The look in her glowing, golden eyes was enough to freeze anyone in their tracks. Her eyes were not the eyes of a mere warrior. They were the eyes of a predator, sharp and calculating. Serithra had seen it all: battle, death, and the fall of entire empires. She had conquered entire star systems with a mere thought, had shattered fleets with a wave of her hand, and now, here she was, standing before a single human soldier who had dared to cross her path. "You're brave," Serithra said, her voice a low, menacing growl that echoed off the canyon walls. "But it's a foolish kind of bravery. You won't last a minute, human." Thorne didn't flinch. He had seen worse threats than her in his time: alien beasts, warlords, and generals who boasted similar victories. None of them had ever come close to breaking him. He was Earth's finest soldier, a man who had survived the harshest combat, faced down enemies that outnumbered him 100 to 1, and still walked away. His eyes never left her as she stood tall and confident, a smile creeping along her lips. He could see the arrogance in her stance, the way she held herself as though she was untouchable, as if nothing in the universe could harm her. And yet, something about this woman unnerved him. There was an energy to her, something raw and primal that seemed to resonate with every breath she took. It wasn't just her strength that commanded respect. It was the sheer, unrelenting force of her presence, the aura of invincibility that she exuded. "You misunderstand me," Thorne said, his voice steady, unwavering. "I didn't come here to fight you. I came here to take what's mine." Serithra's eyes narrowed, and she took a step forward, her movements fluid and graceful, yet full of purpose. "What's yours?" she asked, her tone mocking, as if the idea that a human could claim anything in this galaxy was laughable. "You come to this place, to the heart of Xylothian territory, and you think you can simply take what you want." Her voice became colder, sharper. "What makes you think you stand a chance, human? You are nothing but a speck in the grand scheme of things. You cannot defeat me, not even in your wildest dreams." Thorne took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation. His mission had been clear from the beginning: secure the alien technology, return to Earth, and prevent the impending invasion. But now, staring down the most feared warrior in the galaxy, it felt as though everything had been turned upside down. The stakes were no longer just about technology or power, it was a matter of survival. He straightened up, his hands resting on the hilt of his plasma sword, though he had no intention of using it. Not yet. His mind raced as he considered his options. Serithra was faster than any opponent he had ever faced, and her strength was beyond comprehension. He could see it in the way she carried herself, in the confidence that radiated from her every movement. But there was something about the way she underestimated him that gave him hope. She thought she had already won, and that was her biggest mistake. "You're wrong," Thorne said, his voice steady but carrying an edge of defiance. "I've beaten worse odds than this, and I will do it again. Now step aside. I don't want to fight you, but if you force me, I will." Serithra's laugh echoed across the canyon, rich and full of derision. "You're insane," she said, her voice tinged with a sense of amusement. "You stand before me, with no weapon, no army, and no hope. You are alone. You are outmatched. And yet, you think you can threaten me?" Thorne's gaze hardened. "I don't need an army. I don't need hope. All I need is a chance." With that, he took a step forward, closing the gap between them. The air crackled with tension as the two of them stood face to face, an immovable object and an unstoppable force, locked in a battle of wills. Serithra's smirk faded slightly as she watched him, her eyes narrowing, assessing the human before her. There was something about him, a quiet, undeniable strength that she had not anticipated. But it didn't matter. "You won't last a minute," she repeated, her voice cold and final. But Thorne just smiled. "We'll see about that." Serithra lunged at him, her speed almost a blur. Thorne was already moving, ducking and dodging as she swung at him with inhuman speed. Her fist, encased in a gauntlet of dark, shimmering material, missed him by mere inches as he twisted away, barely keeping ahead of her. The ground beneath them cracked and split from the force of her blows, but Thorne didn't flinch. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins, pushing him to move faster, think sharper. Serithra swung again, this time aiming for his head. Thorne sidestepped and dropped to the ground in a roll, coming up behind her. He lashed out with his plasma sword, aiming for her exposed flank. But to his surprise, she spun around with inhuman grace, blocking the attack with a weapon of her own, a gleaming, jagged blade that hummed with deadly energy. Their weapons clashed in a burst of light and energy, the sound of metal against metal ringing out through the canyon. The force of their strikes sent shockwaves through the air, sending dust flying into the atmosphere. Serithra's strength was undeniable, but Thorne's skill and agility kept him one step ahead. Every time she thought she had him cornered, he slipped out of her grasp, his movements swift and precise. "You're good," Serithra said, her voice tinged with respect. "But not good enough." Thorne grinned, a fierce determination lighting up his eyes. "We'll see." The battle raged on, each strike, each counter, a testament to the sheer willpower of both combatants. Thorne had no intention of backing down, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. The weight of humanity's future rested on his shoulders, and he would do whatever it took to survive this. The question, however, remained, would he survive long enough to see Earth's victory, or would he fall before the greatest warrior the galaxy had ever known? The battle raged like a storm, with each clash sending shockwaves across the canyon floor. Serithra was relentless, her movements fluid and deadly. Every strike from her blade seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 warriors, and yet, Captain Thorne kept pace. The air around them shimmered with energy as their weapons collided, sparks flying into the dust-laden winds. Each time their swords met, there was a flare of light, so bright it momentarily blinded the onlookers, except there were no onlookers. There was only the two of them, locked in combat. Thorne was too fast for an average soldier, but Serithra's reflexes were inhuman. Her agility outmatched his, but his tactical mind kept him ahead. He had studied her movements, anticipated her strikes, and adapted to her style with every passing second. His plasma sword glowed, its blue blade humming with power, each strike an extension of his own defiance. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving something. To himself. To Earth. To her. "Is that all you've got, human?" Serithra hissed as she disengaged and backed away, watching him with those calculating golden eyes. Her smirk was gone, replaced by a faint, almost imperceptible recognition. "You fight well for a mere mortal." Thorne didn't respond. His chest heaved, and his muscles screamed with fatigue, but he kept his focus. "You haven't seen anything yet." With a sudden burst of strength, Serithra lunged again, this time faster than ever before, her blade aimed directly for Thorne's chest. But he was ready. In a blur of motion, he sidestepped, bringing his sword up to parry hers just in time. The force of their contact sent a shock wave through the air, the sound of metal scraping metal echoing off the canyon walls. He wasn't going to win this fight through sheer strength alone. He knew that. But he could wear her down. He could outlast her. Because Earth had taught him to endure. Serithra growled in frustration and attempted another strike, but Thorne was already on the move. He spun low, sliding beneath her guard, narrowly missing her as her blade cleaved through the air above him. The ground beneath them cracked from the sheer power of her swings. Thorne's mind raced as he dodged another strike, the heat of battle settling in. He knew he had only moments before exhaustion caught up to him. It was only a matter of time before his body failed him, but not yet. He took a deep breath, drawing from the reserve of willpower that had kept him alive through countless impossible situations. His eyes locked on Serithra's, and he saw it. The tiniest flicker of hesitation. Just for a moment. It was enough. With a sudden, calculated move, Thorne darted in, his blade flashing as it connected with Serithra's weapon, knocking it aside. In that instant, he pressed his advantage, delivering a swift blow to her side, just enough to make her stagger. He wasn't sure it had done any lasting damage, but it gave him the opportunity he needed. Thorne didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, closing the gap once more, his body a blur of calculated speed. Serithra snarled, stepping back and raising her blade defensively. Her expression was no longer one of amusement. There was something else in her eyes, something darker. For the first time, she looked at him not as an insect to crush, but as an equal. She was a warrior, and she respected him. But there was no room for respect in battle. Only victory. You have a warrior's heart, human, she said, her voice low and measured. But it won't be enough. Before he could respond, she lunged again, a flurry of strikes faster than anything he had encountered before. He blocked, dodged, parried, but each strike pushed him further back. Her movements were too fluid, too precise. His strength was waning, and he knew that if he didn't end this soon, he would be crushed. But then, as the world seemed to slow down, he saw at the smallest of openings in her defense. Her blade was slightly too far forward, leaving her torso exposed. Thorne didn't hesitate. He surged forward, using the last of his strength to bring his sword down in a decisive arc, cutting through her defenses in one swift, decisive motion. The battle ended in a flash. Chapter 2, A New Alliance. The canyon was eerily silent as the dust settled. The echo of their battle still reverberated through the still air. Captain Thorne stood, breathing heavily, his plasma sword still humming with a faint glow in his hand. His heart raced, his muscles aching from the intense combat. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, and he thought perhaps he had lost, that the battle had taken more from him than he could give. But when he opened his eyes, there she was, Queen Serithra, kneeling on the ground, her dark blade dropped beside her. Her armor was scratched and dented, her violet skin glistening with sweat. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she looked up at him, her golden eyes full of something he hadn't expected, respect. You, she said, her voice soft, almost thoughtful. You have defeated me. Thorne didn't lower his blade. He kept it pointed at her, though his grip had loosened slightly. He had won, but he wasn't sure if this was the victory he had wanted. She was still a queen, still the most powerful warrior he had ever faced, and he knew that, despite this battle, she wasn't someone to be underestimated. I didn't come here to kill you, Thorne said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of the situation. I came to stop your empire from wiping out my people. But if this is the price of peace, then so be it. Serithra's eyes flickered with an emotion he couldn't quite place. She slowly rose to her feet, her movements cautious, but still full of power. You think your people are worth saving? Her voice held a note of curiosity now, as though she were genuinely intrigued. Your planet has been nothing but a nuisance to us for years. We were preparing to end this war before it began. But you've changed things. Thorne didn't lower his guard, but his expression softened slightly. I'm not the only one who wants peace. But my people don't understand what's at stake. I had to show them that we are strong enough to fight back. Serithra tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. You believe you've won, but this battle was only the beginning. You will need more than your strength to win the war. The Xylothian Empire does not bow to threats. I didn't threaten you, Thorne replied, his voice calm but unwavering. I showed you that we are capable of standing up to you. We don't have to win every battle to win the war. Serithra regarded him for a long moment, the silence between them stretching out like an endless chasm. Then, finally, she spoke, her voice heavy with both acknowledgement and something else, something deeper. "Perhaps we can find another way," she said, her tone shifting. "Perhaps there is more to this human spirit than I thought." Thorne nodded, still wary, but for the first time, he allowed himself to believe that there might be a way forward. That perhaps, in this strange, unexpected encounter, he had found the beginning of something larger, something that could change the fate of both their worlds. As the wind howled around them, the two stood there, not as enemies, but as reluctant allies, standing on the precipice of an uncertain future. The silence between them hung heavy, as though the universe itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Captain Thorne still held his plasma sword loosely in his grip, but there was a weight to his decision now, a burden heavier than any battle he had fought before. Serithra, the fierce queen of the Zilothian Empire, had been brought to her knees not by the might of his weapon, but by the strength of his will. And now, the tables had turned. What was once a battle for survival was slowly morphing into something altogether unexpected. "You surprise me, human," Serithra spoke again, her voice a strange mix of admiration and something deeper, perhaps even curiosity. She had risen to her full height now, the glow from her eyes dimming, the pride that had once radiated from her now tempered by an uncertainty that Thorne was keen to recognize. Thorne, though still wary, didn't let his guard down completely. He had fought her, he knew what she was capable of, and even if she had lost the physical battle, her mind remained sharp, calculating, always looking for an advantage. "You've already killed millions of my people, Serithra," Thorne said, his tone grave, devoid of the brash arrogance he had once held. "What is it that you want now? Do you want to finish what you started, or are you trying to salvage your reputation?" A flicker of something passed across her face, something Thorne could not quite place, an emotion he had not expected from a warrior like her. She stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate. The remnants of the dust storm caught in the wind, swirling around them like a visual representation of the fractured path ahead. "Reputation?" she asked, her tone cool and calculating, though there was something raw beneath it. "You still don't understand, do you, human? I don't fight for reputation. I fight for the survival of my people, for the continuation of my empire. My reputation is built on the strength of my actions, not on the whims of others. I do what is necessary." Thorne's eyes narrowed. He had heard this type of speech before, from generals and warlords who justified their brutal conquests under the guise of necessity. But something about Serithra's words held a deeper weight, as if she believed what she said not as an excuse, but as a conviction. "And what about your empire?" Thorne asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Do you think it can survive without further conquest? Without the endless bloodshed? What happens when there's no one left to conquer?" Serithra's gaze hardened, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she looked at the wreckage around them, the ruins of a once glorious civilization, now forgotten, lost to the annals of history. A flicker of regret passed through her eyes, but it was gone before Thorne could fully register it. "We were built to conquer, to grow," Serithra finally said, her voice distant now, lost in thought. "But there comes a point where we must ask ourselves what it's all for. Our people, they need peace as much as they need victory. Perhaps it is time for something different." Thorne listened, studying her closely. He had expected defiance, perhaps even rage, but instead he heard something else in her voice, a weary acceptance, as though the fight that had defined her life had finally reached its breaking point. She was still a warrior, but for the first time, he could see a crack in her armor. "Then let's make peace," Thorne said, his words carrying a weight he had not intended. "Not through more bloodshed, but through understanding. If you truly want to change things, we have to work together. I can't stop your empire with my sword alone, and you can't defeat Earth by destroying us. But maybe, just maybe, we can find a way forward." Serithra stood there for a long moment, considering his words. Thorne watched her, his mind racing with the possibilities of what this unexpected turn of events could mean. The Zilothian Empire, with its ancient technology and vast military might, could be an invaluable ally or a devastating enemy. But the key to all of this, to Earth's survival, would lie in their ability to coexist, to find common ground. "I'll consider it," Serithra finally said, her voice soft but firm. "But understand this, human, my people have always known war. Peace will not come easily, and it will not come quickly, but perhaps it is worth trying. For both of our worlds. Thorne nodded, a reluctant respect blossoming in his chest. She was still a warrior, and her empire was still a threat. But for the first time, it felt as though a door had opened, just a crack. It was a chance, a long shot, perhaps, but a chance nonetheless. Serithra extended a hand, the gesture unexpected but full of meaning. "We will need time," she said, her eyes meeting his. "Time to rebuild. Time to reconcile. But if you are willing to take that first step with me, then I will walk it with you." Thorne hesitated for only a moment before he reached out, shaking her hand with a firmness that matched the gravity of their new alliance. It was a gesture that signified more than just a moment of peace. It was a recognition of shared responsibility. The fate of two worlds, two empires, now rested in their hands. Chapter 3. The beginning of a new dawn. The days that followed their unlikely alliance were filled with uncertainty and cautious optimism. Captain Thorne, now in the company of Serithra, traveled to the heart of the Xylothian Empire. The journey was long and treacherous, filled with encounters that tested both of their resolve. Earth was still on the brink of disaster, facing the unknown consequences of their new peace agreement, but Thorne remained steadfast. Every step brought him closer to securing Earth's survival. But even as they journeyed, the shadows of those who opposed peace began to reveal themselves. While Serithra's decision to seek peace had been met with hesitation within her own ranks, the leaders of the Xylothian Empire, those who thrived on conquest, had no intention of allowing this fragile truce to succeed. Even within Thorne's own government, there were those who saw Serithra as a threat, as a conqueror who would destroy Earth the moment she saw an opening. The tension between the two empires grew with every passing day. There were whispers, spies, and saboteurs in both camps, forces that sought to undermine the fragile peace that Thorne and Serithra were trying to build. As they arrived at the Xylothian capital, a massive city of dark, imposing spires that reached for the heavens, Thorne knew that the real battle had only just begun. The question wasn't whether Earth could survive the invasion. The question was whether Earth and Xyloth could learn to coexist, or whether the war would resume, this time with both sides knowing just how devastating the other could be. As he stood on the balcony of the Xylothian palace, overlooking the sprawling city below, Thorne turned to Serithra, who stood beside him. The weight of their decision hung between them like an invisible storm cloud, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope in the air. This was only the beginning. "This will work, won't it?" Thorne asked, his voice filled with a quiet determination. Serithra turned to him, her golden eyes flickering with something new, a spark of uncertainty, but also of belief. "It has to, for the sake of our worlds." And so, the first steps toward peace had been taken, but Thorne knew that the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, betrayal, and sacrifice. The real test, however, would be in their ability to trust one another and navigate the fragile alliance they had forged. The fate of Earth, of Xyloth, and of the galaxy now rested on their shoulders. The first few weeks of their fragile alliance passed in a tense calm. Captain Thorne was now in the heart of the Xylothian Empire, surrounded by a civilization far more advanced than Earth, but a civilization fractured by its own internal divisions. Serithra had offered him a place by her side, a representative of Earth, but their meetings were often strained. The political atmosphere was charged with skepticism from both sides. Earth, on the brink of war, had to decide whether to embrace this new alliance or fight for survival. The Xylothian leaders, particularly the warlords who had built their empire on conquest, saw Thorne as a threat to everything they had known. The council room, a massive chamber of onyx stone and polished metal, felt colder than it had ever before. The Xylothian lords, seated in towering thrones, regarded Thorne with disdain. The warlords who had supported Serithra's late father, and the older guard who believed in the Empire's destiny of domination, scoffed at the very idea of peace. It was here, in this ancient chamber of power, that Serithra's decision to seek peace would be tested. "You dare bring a human to our council?" One of the older warlords spat, his voice like the growl of a feral beast. "You think we will throw away thousands of years of tradition for the whims of one soldier?" Thorne held his ground, his posture straight, his eyes unwavering. He had faced military tribunals and scornful generals, but the gravity of this moment felt heavier. His role as a representative of Earth's last hope now felt like a crushing burden. He knew the risks. He knew that he wasn't just fighting for Earth, but for the possibility of peace itself. "We're not throwing away traditions," Thorne replied, his voice calm, yet commanding. "We're evolving them. If you cannot see that, then your empire is doomed to fall, just as all empires do when they stagnate." The room erupted into angry murmurs, but Serithra, seated beside him, raised her hand for silence. Her expression was one of quiet authority, but even she could not hide the uncertainty in her eyes. She was caught between her people's warlike past and the future she wanted to build. A future that, she hoped, would be shaped by both their worlds, together. "You think this human knows what's best for us?" Another warlord sneered, his face contorting with disdain. "You've lost your mind, Serithra. What does he know of the Xylothian Empire?" Serithra stood, her regal presence commanding attention. The warlords fell silent, their eyes locked onto her as she spoke, her voice full of conviction. "This human," she said, her gaze shifting to Thorne, "has shown us something we have forgotten. Courage, yes. But more importantly, he has shown us the strength to change. This empire cannot continue on its current path. War will destroy us all. We must evolve or perish." The warlords looked from Serithra to Thorne and then back again. The room was filled with tension, the decision hanging in the balance. Serithra's voice cut through the silence once more, but this time it carried an undeniable weight. "Earth will be our ally, or we will have nothing left to conquer." For the first time, the room was still. No one spoke. No one dared to challenge Serithra's command. The empire that had conquered countless worlds was now on the brink of a new era. A fragile one. Chapter 4. The Final Decision. The following days were tense, filled with negotiations, subtle manipulations, and more moments of doubt than Thorne cared to count. But amidst all the chaos, something unexpected began to stir, a sense of shared purpose, however fleeting. He had never imagined that the key to Earth's survival would lie not in weapons, but in words. However, not all factions within the Xylothian Empire were so eager to embrace the idea of peace. As Serithra and Thorne worked tirelessly to build a foundation for their alliance, a splinter group of Xylothian extremists began plotting against them, determined to preserve the old ways. These warriors, who had never known anything but conquest, saw the peace talks as an affront to their very existence. Thorne found out about their plans just days before an important diplomatic summit. The extremists had planted agents within the palace, their objective clear: sabotage the peace talks and kill both Serithra and Thorne. They wanted to prevent the alliance from forming at any cost. As the summit neared, Thorne and Serithra found themselves at the center of a web of deceit, surrounded by enemies both within and outside their ranks. The tension was palpable as Serithra turned to Thorne one night, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "We may not survive this, you know," she said quietly, the weight of their situation heavy in her voice. "You came here to save Earth, but I wonder, are we too far gone? Is peace even possible?" Thorne could feel the doubt creeping into his own heart. The danger had escalated faster than they had anticipated. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. They were not just fighting for survival anymore, they were fighting for a future that seemed impossible to grasp. But despite it all, he had to believe that it could work. There had to be another way. "We'll survive," he said, the fire of determination in his voice. "Not just for us, but for both our peoples. I didn't come this far to give up now." The night of the summit, they entered the Grand Hall, surrounded by the leaders of both Earth and the Xylothian Empire. The tension was so thick it could be cut with a knife. As they took their seats, a wave of realization washed over Thorne. They were no longer just two individuals from different worlds. They were the leaders of two civilizations. Fate had brought them together, but now, only their choices would decide what came next. Then, the chaos began. Explosions ripped through the hall as hidden agents of the extremist faction unleashed their fury. Screams echoed as the palace guards scrambled to defend the leaders, but it was too late. The attackers moved with the precision of a well-organized force, and in moments, chaos consumed the room. Thorne fought with everything he had, protecting Serithra as the building shook around them. His instincts kicked in, his training taking over as he moved to defend her from every direction. But even in the heat of battle, he saw something remarkable. Serithra was not the leader who cowered in fear. She fought alongside him, with every ounce of her strength and power. She was not just a warrior, she was a queen. And together, they stood against the tide. After the dust settled, the extremists were defeated, but the cost was high. The palace was in ruins, the peace talks shattered, and many lives were lost. But through it all, Thorne and Serithra remained. In the aftermath of the bloodshed, the two of them emerged from the wreckage, standing side by side. Is it over? Thorne asked, looking at the devastation around them. Serithra turned to him, her expression grim but resolute. It's not over yet. But we've taken the first step. Peace can still be ours, if we are willing to fight for it. And in that moment, Thorne understood. The war had not ended. But the possibility of a new beginning had just begun.